You think you know the person you share your pillow with, until a casual discovery turns your world upside down. I'm Thompson, and it's specialist with an ordinary life, until a Dyson fan changed everything. It didn't just alter the temperature in my bedroom, it exposed a shocking secret that could shatter my marriage. This is not just a story about betrayal, it's about rediscovering oneself in the shadow of treachery. Let's formally listen to today's story of infidelity. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for your support. The gentle lapping of water against our small boat provided a soothing melody, interrupted only by the occasional splash of a fish jumping nearby. I took deep breaths, savoring the crisp Montana air, as the first rays of sunlight appeared over the distant mountains. Ethan's annual fishing trip was more than just a tradition. It was a sanctuary, a brief respite from the daily grind. Are you going to sit there daydreaming all day, or will you catch something? Ethan's gruff voice cut through my reverb. I chuckled and reached for my fishing rod, just taking everything in mind. Laura always says I return from these trips a changed man. Ethan rolled his eyes, but I noticed a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, we understand. You and Laura are a perfect couple. Some of us aren't as lucky. The lightness in his tone couldn't disguise the underlying bitterness. I felt a twinge of guilt remembering Ethan's recent breakup. Hello. I'm sorry about Rebecca. How are you holding up? He shrugged, intent on rebaiting his hook. It's what it is. You cannot force someone to stay if they do not want to write. True. I nodded. I cast my line into the calm waters. However, this does not alleviate the pain. We settled into a comfortable silence, the rhythmic casting and reeling a meditative dance that we honed over years of friendship. As the morning went on, we swapped stories and our laughter echoed across the lake. Remember that time in high school, when you attempted to ask Melissa Jenkins to prom? Ethan smiled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I groaned, feeling my face warm. Despite the years that had passed, God did not remind me. I tripped over my own feet and face landing right in front of her. Then you mumbled something about how comfortable the floor was. And just lay there. Ethan howled with laughter, almost dropping his fishing rod. That's correct. I grumbled, but I couldn't help but laugh along with them. At the very least, unlike some of my friends, I did not end up going on stag. Ethan gripped his chest in mock offense. Hey, I'll let you know that I had a great time flying solo. No drama, as I'm a person, no expectations. As our laughter subsided, we fell into a comfortable silence. I felt deeply content as I watched the sunlight dance on the water. I'm glad we're still doing this for work, family, and everything else. It's nice to have some time to just be. Ethan nodded. His expression softened. Yeah, me too, man. However, all of this talk about your ideal life with Laura is making me feel like a third wheel on our own damn fishing trip. I snorted and shook my head. Come on. It is not perfect. We have our moments. Oh yes. Name one flaw in paradise. Ethan challenged, raising an eyebrow. I paused and racked my brain. Well, she occasionally leaves her hair in the shower drain. This drives me crazy. Ethan looked at me for a moment before bursting out laughing. That is it. There's hair in the drain. Man, you really have it made. I shrugged, feeling a warm sensation spread through my chest as I thought of Laura. What shall I say? I got lucky. As the day progressed, we reminisced about old times and discussed our future plans. Ethan discussed expanding his mechanic shop, and I shared my ideas for some custom furniture pieces I wanted to build. Ethan explained cracking open a beer as the sun began to set. I may mock your perfect life, but I'm happy for you, Alex. Really, I smiled, moved by the authenticity in his voice. Thank you, man, and hey, you'll meet someone. Rebecca was not the one, but she's still out there. Ethan nodded and took a long swig from his beer. Yes, maybe for the time being I'm going to focus solely on myself. No drama or complications. Little did I know as we sat there in our bubble of contentment, knowing that complications were just around the corner. The calm waters of the lake provided no indication of the storm that was about to break over my life, threatening to wash away everything I held dear. The warm glow of the campfire cast dancing shadows across Ethan and my faces as we lounged in our camp chairs, nursing our beers and basking in the comfortable silence that only years of friendship can provide. The fishing had been good and our cooler was full of trout that would make excellent eating once we got home. The thought of it made me smile. As much as I enjoy these trips with Ethan, a part of me always looks forward to returning to Laura and the life we've built together. The sudden buzz of my phone interrupted the peaceful evening. I took it out of my pocket, frowning at the unfamiliar number. "What up?" Ethan inquired. Noting my expression, "Our neighbor, Mrs. Harper, sent us a text," I responded, my frown deepening. As I read the message saying she had been meaning to tell me something important, I typed a quick response asking her what was going on. The response arrived almost immediately, and as I read it, I felt a cold knot form in the pit of my stomach. Alex, Ethan's voice appeared to come from afar. "What is it, man? You look like you saw a ghost." I swallowed hard, trying to process what I just read. "It's probably nothing. Mrs. Harper says she's noticed a black car outside our house several times recently. She claims that a man she does not recognize has been visiting her. While I am not at home." Ethan let out a low whistle. "Damn. That is something. What do you think this means?" I shook my head, hoping to dispel the uneasy feeling that was creeping over me. "It's probably nothing. Perhaps a new friend of Laura's or someone at work," Ethan may have agreed, but I could hear it out in his voice. He took another swig of his beer and chuckled, "Or maybe Laura has a hot young lover on the side diet." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I knew Ethan was joking. His filter was loosened by the alcohol, but the thought had already taken hold in my mind. I forced a laugh, attempting to play along right, because every man fantasizes about coming home to find his wife hooking up with the pool boy. "Hey, you never know." Ethan shrugged. His words were slightly sly. "It's always the ones you don't expect. Right. Everyone is jealous of the perfect couples." I stood up abruptly, almost knocking over my chair. "I'm going for a walk. Clear my head a little." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes filled with concern rather than mischief. "Hello, man. I was just kidding around. Laura would never." "I understand." I cut him off, perhaps too abruptly. "I just need some air." I street-drove away into the darkness, my flashlight beam bobbing ahead of me as I made my way along the lakeshore. The earlier portion of the evening had vanished, replaced by a nagging anxiety that I couldn't shake. Laura would never cheat on me. I knew with every fiber of my being that we had a good life and a solid marriage. She loved me as much as I loved her. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get rid of it. I'm not sure how long I walked. My mind is racing with possibilities. Each is more unlikely than the last. By the time I returned to the campsite, I had convinced myself that I was acting ridiculously. Mrs. Harper's observations must have had a completely innocent explanation. Ethan was still awake when I returned, poking at the last embers of our fire. As I approached, he looked up, his face covered in guilt and concern. "Look, Alex, I apologize for what I said earlier. I was out of line." I brushed off his apology. I sank back into my chair. "That's fine. You were simply joking around." "Still, I should not have said that. I understand how much Laura means to you." I nodded, staring at the glowing coals. "I think we should return early to check things out." "You understand?" Ethan was quiet for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, if that's what you want to do, we can pack up early in the morning." "Thanks," I responded, feeling both relieved and concerned about the decision. "I'm sure it's all you need to know." Ethan finished for me. "I understand it, man, and hey, whatever happens, I have your back." As we retired for the night, I lay awake in my sleeping bag. Mrs. Harper's words and Ethan's ill-timed joke were on repeat in my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid and that I'd laugh about it all once I got home and saw Laura. But as I finally fell asleep, a small voice in the back of my mind warned that nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan and I were just starting to dismantle our campsite as the first light of dawn began to shine. We worked in near silence, the usual easy banter of our trips, replaced by a tense anticipation that hung in the air like a brewing storm. As I rolled up my sleeping bag, my mind raced with scenarios, each more bizarre than the last. I tried to concentrate on the task at hand, but my mind kept going back to Laura, the mysterious black car and the stranger Mrs. Hopper had seen. "Are you ready to hit the road?" Ethan's voice interrupted my reverie. I looked up and saw him standing by a packed-up truck, keys in hand. I nodded, carrying my backpack. "Yeah, let's go." The drive back was not like our usual post-trip journeys. Instead of reminiscing about our favorite memories from the lake or plotting our next adventure, the truck's cab was filled with an uneasy silence. I stared out the window, feeling a mix of dread and anticipation as I watched the Montana landscape blur past. After about an hour, Ethan cleared his throat. "So you want to discuss it?" I turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "What is this about?" He shrugged, maintaining his gaze on the road. "You know why we're returning early? Laura, a mysterious visitor." I felt a surge of irritability. "There's nothing to talk about. We're just going to check things out." "That is all right." Ethan nodded, but I could detect doubt in his voice. "And you are concerned about what we might find when we get there?" "Of course I am worried." I snapped my composure, finally slipping. "How should I feel? My neighbor informs me that a stranger has been visiting my wife while away, and my best friend jokes about her having an affair. It's not exactly a recipe for peace of mind." Ethan grimaced. "I apologized for that, man. I was drunk. I was not thinking," I exhaled. "Yes, I understand. It is not your fault. It's just Laura and me. We've always been solid." You know, the idea that she could be. I couldn't bring myself to say those words. "Hey, we don't know anything for certain." Yet Ethan spoke softly. "Now, for all we know, this could be a massive misunderstanding. Perhaps it is a surprise party planner or something." I let out a humorless chuckle. "Yes, because that is far more likely than my wife cheating on me." Ethan said, "Look, Alex," as his grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I know things look bad right now, but don't jump to conclusions. You and Laura have a good relationship going. Don't throw it away because you have vague suspicions." His words were intended to reassure, but they only fueled my growing rage. So what, I should simply ignore it, pretend everything is fine? That is not what I am saying." Ethan protested. "I'm just saying you should talk to Laura before doing anything drastic. Learn her side of the story." I scoffed red because, if I ask nicely, she will simply admit that she is cheating. Ethan gave me a concerned look. "Man, this isn't like you." "Where is Alex? Who always sees the good in people? The man who trusts his wife." His words struck home, and I felt a wave of shame wash over me. He was correct. This was not like me at all, but fear and doubt had taken root, twisting my thoughts into unexpected patterns. "I do not know," I confessed quietly. "I'm not sure who I am right now." We fell silent again, the miles ticking by as the sun rose higher in the sky. My mind continued to race, imagining every possible scenario. For when we arrived home, as we approached our town, Ethan spoke up once more. "So what is the plan? You want me to come in with you?" Or I paused. Part of me wished to face this alone, to confront Laura in private if there was anything to confront. But there's another part, the part that was scared and uncertain. One of my best friends is by my side. "Yes," I said. "Finally. Yes, I think I want you there. Just in case." Ethan nodded, his face grim and determined. "All right. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." As we turned onto my street, I felt my heart rate increase. Every house we passed brought us closer to the moment of truth, potentially shattering my life as I knew it. There I sat, pointing to the black car. I have never seen it before. Sure enough, a sleek black sedan was parked a few houses down from us. It could have belonged to anyone. They could have been there for any reason, but at the time it seemed like a foreboding sign. Ethan pulled up across the street from our house, turning off the engine for a long time. We just sat there staring at the familiar facade, which seemed strange and foreboding. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan inquired, his voice low and serious. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what lay ahead. "No, I admit, but I want to know the truth." As we exited the truck and approached the house, I felt as if I were walking into a storm. Whatever happened next, I knew that my life would never be the same. The calm had ended. Now it was time to face the storm. My heart raced in my chest as I inserted the spare key into the lock. Ethan stood behind me, his presence both comforting and unsettling. The house was strangely quiet as we stepped inside, our footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. "Laura," I called out, my voice unusually loud in the silence. No response. Ethan nudged me and pointed towards the living room. A faint glow emanated from the partially open door. As we got closer, I could hear hushed voices and the distinct sound of kisses. My blood became cold. This cannot be happening. It had to be a mistake or a misunderstanding. However, as I pushed the door open, the scene before me shattered any remaining illusions. There on our sofa, Laura was on our couch, locked in an intimate embrace with a man I had never seen before. They were so focused on each other that they didn't notice us. At first, I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. Ethan, on the other hand, took immediate action. He pulled out his phone and began recording. His face was a mask of grim determination. Laura noticed a slight movement. She looked up, her expression shifting from passion to shock to horror. In quick succession. "Alex," she gasped, pushing him away and scrambling to cover herself. "Oh God, Alex." The man turned, his eyes widening as he assessed the situation. He looked older than I expected, probably in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and an expensive-looking watch glinting on his wrist. "Who in the hell are you?" I growled, finally discovering my voice. The man stood up and straightened his rumpled shirt. "I am Daniel Turner." "Look, this is not as it appears." I gave a harsh laugh. "Really? Because it appears that you are screwing my wife in my own home." Laura was crying now. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Alex, please listen to me." "So what is it?" "Laura," I snarled, my shot turning to rage. "Because it appears to be very clear from where I'm standing." Daniel took a step forward. He raised his hands to politely. "Now let us all calm down and discuss this like adults." That was the incorrect thing to say. In 2 strides, I crossed the room, grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "What are we talking about? How have you been sneaking around with my wife? How you thought you could enter my home and Alex stop?" Laura cried out, "In on my own. Please, you're hurting him." I released Daniel and turned to face Laura, the woman I loved. I thought I knew the woman, but she looked like a stranger now. "And how are you hurting me?" "Laura, did you think about it while allowing this man into our bed?" "It was not like that," she pleaded. It's just happened. I never intended to him." I interrupted her to avoid being caught. "How long has this gone on?" "Laura, how long have you lied to my face?" Before she could respond, there was a thud behind me. We all turned to find Ethan's phone on the floor. The recording stopped. Daniel's eyes widened with panic. You were recording us. You cannot do that. I will sue you for invasion of privacy." Ethan snorted. "Best of luck with that, buddy. I'm pretty sure breaking and entering trumps any privacy concerns." "Breaking and entering," Daniel sputtered. "I was invited." "Not by me," I growled. "And here's my house. As far as I'm concerned, you are trespassing." Laura stepped between us. Her face was stained with tears, but she remained determined. "Alex, please, can we discuss this alone?" I stared at her. This woman had been the focus of my life for so long. Looking at her now, all I could feel was cold, hard anger. There is nothing to talk about. Laura, you've made your choice. You must now accept this reality. I turned to Ethan. Help me get this piece of trash out of my house. We grabbed Daniel, who began protesting loudly. You cannot do this. I have rights. Laura was in the thirst. Laura, tell them. But Laura stood there, eyes wide with tears, as we dragged her lover to the front door and unceremoniously shoved him out onto the porch. If I ever see you near my house or my wife again, I hissed, I will make you regret the day you were born. Understand? Daniel nodded frantically, scrambling to his feet and dashed for his car as he peeled away. I returned to the house prepared to confront the devastation of my marriage. The slam of the front door reverberated throughout the house as I stormed back inside. Ethan is following closely behind me. Laura stood in the center of the living room, arms wrapped around herself, appearing small and vulnerable. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Alex, please, she began, her voice quivering. I understand you're angry, but please allow me to try. What? Laura. I cut her off with a sharp voice that made her flinch. You have been cheating on me. You have been making a fool of me. She shook her head furiously. It's not like that. Daniel. He understands me in ways that I do not. I finished for her, laughing bitterly and harshly. Is that what you plan to say? That I do not understand you? Laura's gaze shifted to Ethan, who stood quietly by the door. Do we have to do this now? Is he with us here? Yes, I snapped. Ethan is my best friend. He has been more loyal to me in the last few hours than you have been throughout our marriage. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Look, perhaps I should step outside and give you some privacy. No, I replied firmly. You stay. I want a witness to this. Laura's face wrinkled. An eyewitness. Alex, what are you saying? I moved closer to her. My voice is low and dangerous. I'm saying it's over. Laura, in the fifth side. Laura, we're finished. I want you out of the house tonight. Her eyes widened with shock. Out. But where should I go? I'm not sure and don't care. I replied coldly. Maybe your boyfriend Daniel has an extra room. Or maybe you can stay with one of your girlfriends, whom you've probably been lying to about us for months. It wasn't months, Laura protested. It only started a few weeks ago. I swear, Alex, I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake. I laughed humorously. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. This was a choice. Laura, a choice you made every time you let that man touch you. Every time you lied to my face. She reached out, trying to grab my hand. I jerked away as if her touch burned. Please, Alex, I love you. We can work through this. Go to counseling. Rebuild our trust. Please don't throw away everything we have. For a moment, I almost wavered. The pain in her eyes, the desperation in her voice. It was all so familiar. This was the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built my life around. But then I remembered the scene I had walked in on, and my resolve hardened. We don't have anything anymore, Laura. I spoke in a flat, final tone. You threw everything away the moment you decided to cheat. Ethan cleared his throat. Alex, how about the video? Laura's head snapped upward. Video? What video? I smiled. But it wasn't warm. Oh, did I mention? Ethan recorded your brief encounter with Daniel. So if you're thinking about blaming me for everything in the divorce, think again. Laura's face lost its color. You would not. Alex, please think about what this could mean for my career and reputation. You should have considered that before inviting another man into our home. I replied, now I want you to pack a bag and leave. You have 1 hour. Laura stood there, tears streaming down her cheeks. Alex, I saved it. I cut her off. I do not want to hear any more of your excuses or apologies. Just go. She stumbled out of the room sobbing. I felt a strange sense of calm come over me. The anger was still present, burning brightly, but beneath it was a steely determination. Laura had betrayed me and destroyed the life we had built together. Now it was my turn to destroy hers. I turned to Ethan, who was looking at me with concern and admiration. "Do you still have that video?" He nodded and held up his phone. "Yes, ma'am. What would you like to do with it?" I smiled. This time, there was a hint of danger in it. "I want them to pay Ty. Both of them. I want them to regret Regit ever crossing me." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he simply nodded. "Okay. Man, whatever you need. I'm here." As we stood there planning our next move, I heard Laura moving around upstairs packing her belongings. The sound of her sobs carried down, but I felt nothing. The Laura I had loved had vanished, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I was going to make sure she paid the price. The front door closed, with a finality that seemed to reverberate throughout the empty house. Laura had left, taking a suitcase full of clothes and leaving behind the shattered remains of our marriage. Daniel felt a strange mix of numbness and rage. As I stood in the living room, staring at the spot on the couch where I discovered her, Ethan approached cautiously, placing his hand on my shoulder. "You okay, man?" I shook my head, unable to trust myself to speak. The events of the previous few hours played on repeat in my mind, each replay fueling the fire of my rage. "What would you like to do now?" Ethan inquired, his voice low and serious. I turned to face him, my jaw set with determination. "Now we're making them pay." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right. But how?" I walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured a bottle of whiskey into 2 glasses. I began to outline my strategy first. "We need to secure the video. It is our leverage already finished." Ethan spoke while holding up his phone. I backed it up to the cloud and forwarded a copy to my email. "There's no way they can get rid of it right now." I handed him a glass and clinked my own against it in a grim toast. "Good. We need to learn more about this Daniel character. Where he works, who his family is, what he stands to lose." Ethan sipped his whiskey, wincing slightly from the burn. "I can do some research, online, social media, LinkedIn, that kind of thing." "Perfect." I nodded and promised to call my sister Rebecca tomorrow. She's an attorney. She can advise us on how to move forward with the divorce and what legal options we have. We spent the next hour strategizing the bottle of whiskey, gradually emptying. As we planned our revenge, Ethan left, promising to return in the morning with whatever information he could find. And I felt a grim sense of purpose replace the shock and pain of the moment I locked the door behind him. My phone vibrated with a text. It came from Laura. "Alex, could we please talk? I'm very sorry. I love you." I stared at the message for a while, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then, with a single swipe, I deleted it and blocked her number. Walking back into the living room, I noticed our wedding photo on the mantel. Laura's smiling face returned my gaze, frozen in a moment of happiness that now felt like a lie accompanied by an angry snarl. I grabbed the frame and threw it across the room, watching with delight as it shattered against the wall. As I stood there, surrounded by broken glass and the remnants of my marriage, I made a promise to myself. Laura and Daniel believed they could play me for a fool, destroy my life, and walk away unscathed. They were about to discover how wrong they were. I took out my phone and dialed Rebecca's number. It was late, but I was confident she'd answer. When the phone rang, I prepared myself for the conversation ahead. This was only the beginning. Laura and Daniel would be sorry they ever crossed me. By the end of it, Rebecca answered the phone and the line clicked. "Alex, what is wrong?" I took a deep breath and spoke with a steady, cold voice. "Rebecca, I need your help. Laura has been cheating on me and I am going to make her pay." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Rebecca's voice was sharp and focused. "Tell me everything." As I began to recount the events of the night, I felt a cold resolve wash over me. The storm had passed and now it was time to unleash the tempest. Laura and Daniel had no idea what was in store for them, but they were about to find out and I would have no mercy. The morning light filtered through the blinds, creating long shadows in my home office. I sat at my desk and stared at the computer screen. My fingers remained poised over the keyboard. Beside me, Ethan nursed a cup of strong coffee, his eyes bloodshot from a long night of online research. "All right," I spoke, breaking the tense silence. "What do we have?" Ethan sat down his mug and leaned forwards. Daniel Turner is 45 years old. He is a marketing executive at Pinnacle Strategies and has been married to Jennifer Turner for 15 years. No children. They live in Oakwood, an upscale neighborhood. I nodded, absorbing the information. "Good work. Anything else?" "Yes," Ethan continued. His voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "I successfully hacked Laura's social media accounts. You would not believe what I found. My jaw heightened at the mention of Laura's name. "Show me." Ethan turned the laptop towards me and I felt a rush of rage as I scrolled through the messages. Laura and Daniel exchanged explicit text messages and intimate photographs. The timestamp showed that their affair had lasted months, not weeks. As Laura claimed this line, I muttered as my hands curled into fists. "What would you like to do with this?" Ethan inquired, his tone cautious. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile on my face. "We are going to show them to everyone." Ethan's eyes widened. "Everyone? Are you certain about that, man?" "Once it's out there, you can't get it back good," I replied firmly. "I want everyone to understand what they did to their family, friends and co-workers. Everyone." I went back to the computer and began creating an anonymous social media account. As I worked, I explained the plan to Ethan. "We'll make a post with all of the evidence. Texts, photos and everything. We will tag Laura, Daniel, their families and their workplaces. We will distribute it to local community groups by the end. No one in this town will be unaware of their affair." Ethan whistled softly. "That is cold, Alex. But given what they did to you, they deserve it." I nodded grimly. "They certainly do. Now help me set this up. We need to ensure that it cannot be traced back to us." For the next few hours, we worked meticulously, gathering evidence and crafting the post. As I wrote, I felt a grim satisfaction. Every word was a knife, as was every image a blow at those who had betrayed me. Finally, I sat back with my finger hovering over the post button. This is it. Once I hit this, there's no turning back. "Ethan, put your hand on my shoulder. Are you sure about this?" I stared at him, my eyes hard. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. Without hesitation, I pressed the button. The post went live and it quickly spread across the internet. Within minutes, notifications began to pour in, shares, comments, messages of shock and outrage. "It's finished," I said. A weight lifted off my shoulders. "Now we're waiting." Ethan nodded. His face was a mix of all emotions, including concern. "What are the next steps?" I stood up and stretched muscles. "We now watch their world burn, and trust me, this is only the beginning." As we left the office, I felt a surge of vindictive pleasure. Laura and Daniel believed they could play with fire without being burned. They were about to discover how wrong they were. A week had passed since the post went viral, and the consequences were far more devastating than I could have anticipated. I stood in the shadows across the street from Laura's workplace, watching her leave the building. Her head bowed and shoulders hunched, her once confident stride was now hesitant. Her eyes darted nervously, as if anticipating an attack from any direction. As she dashed to her car, I could hear whispers and see pointing fingers from her former colleagues. "Mr. Thompson." A voice behind me caused me to turn. When Daniel began making threats, local detective Mark Evans intervened. "Detective," I nodded and kept my expression neutral. "What can I do for you?" Evans glanced at Laura before returning his attention to me. "I wanted to give you an update on the situation with Mr. Turner. He's been formally warned regarding the threats he made against you. If he tries anything else, we'll be able to take more serious measures." I smiled coldly. "Thank you, Detective. I appreciate your assistance." As Evans walked away, my attention returned to Laura. She sat in her car, her head in her hands. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, not quite pity, but rather recognition of the devastation I had caused. Then I remembered her expression when I caught her with Bradley, and any semblance of sympathy vanished. Ethan had sent me a text message. Daniel's wife has just filed for divorce. It's all over the local media. I smirked and typed a quick response. Good. How's Daniel doing? The reply arrived almost immediately. Not well. He was fired yesterday. Apparently his company has a strict morality clause. While reading the message, I noticed a familiar figure approaching Laura's car. Daniel appeared disheveled and angry. I got closer, staying out of sight, but within earshot. Daniel called out, his voice rough. We need to talk. Laura got out of the car. Her face was a mask of misery. What's there to talk about? Daniel? It is over. We are both ruined. This is entirely your husband's fault. If he had not, what would happen if he hadn't? Laura snapped her voice. Rising caught us. We exposed our lies. We did it. Daniel. We ruined our own lives. I watched Daniel's face contort with rage. Now I refuse to accept it. There must be something we can do. We could sue him for defamation, or Laura laughed bitterly. Sue him with what money? In case you haven't noticed, we are both currently unemployed. And even if we could afford it, everything in that post was accurate. We do not have a leg to stand on. Daniel's shoulders slumped with defeat. So that's it. We simply accept that our lives are over. Laura shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. Our old lives are over. Daniel, we need to find a way to move on. As I watched them, I felt a rush of pleasure. This was exactly what I had hoped to achieve. Their worlds had crumbled, just like mine. When I discovered their betrayal, my phone vibrated again. This time, Rebecca sent a message. My sister just got back from a meeting with Laura's lawyer. She isn't contesting the divorce. You'll receive everything. I smiled, feeling victorious wash over me. Laura and Daniel had gambled with my life and lost everything. But I had no regrets. As I turned to leave, I caught Laura's eye. Briefly, we looked at each other across the parking lot. I saw the pain. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. The figure was about 13 years old. I grew up in McGurker's side. Her gaze conveyed a plea for forgiveness, but my heart was unmoved. I walked away, leaving Laura and Daniel in the ruins of their lives. They had made their decisions and were now facing the consequences, and I was ready to begin rebuilding my life stronger and wiser than before. The tide had turned and I was riding the wave to a new beginning. The lake stretched out before me like a mirror reflecting the Montana sky. I sat in the small fishing boat, rod in hand, appreciating the peaceful solitude. It had been 1 month since the divorce was finalized, a month spent rebuilding and rediscovering myself. The sound of an approaching boat interrupted my reverie. I looked up to see Ethan steering his boat toward mine. Nothing. Yet he called out. As he drew alongside, I shook my head. A small smile appeared on my lips. Nah, but that isn't the point, is it? Ethan chuckled and settled into his seat. True enough. How are you holding up, man? I cast my line out again. Consider the question. You understand what I'm doing? Okay. Better than okay. Actually, Ethan raised his eyebrow. Yeah. I have no regrets about how things went. I met his gaze steadily. Not a single one. They made their decisions and I made mine simple. As that, we settled into a comfortable silence. The gentle lapping of water on our boats. The only sound. After a while, Ethan spoke up again. Have you heard from Laura lately? I shake my head. Nope. I believe she moved out of state in search of a new beginning, and Daniel's cold smile crossed my face. His wife blamed him for everything in the divorce. He's currently working as a door-to-door salesman. Based on what I hear. Ethan whistled softly. Damn, you did a number on them. I shrugged, reeling in my line. They did a number on me first. I've just returned the favor. As the sun began to set, the sky turned a brilliant orange and pink. Ethan and I packed our gear. You know, Ethan said as we prepared to return to shore. I have to admit I was concerned about you for a while. I thought you might do something you'd regret. I paused, gazing out over the tranquil water. I appreciate your concern, Ty, but I knew what I was doing. Every step along the way. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, I see it now. So what comes next for Derek Thompson? I smiled, feeling a sense of anticipation I hadn't had in years. Who knows? For the first time in a long time, I feel liberated. Like I can do anything. Be whoever I want to be. As we steered our boats back to the dock, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The storm had passed and I had come out stronger for it. Laura and Daniel were no longer in my life. Their betrayal is a distant memory. The future stretched out ahead of me, full of opportunities, and I was prepared to accept whatever it might bring on my terms. We're back on shore. As we loaded our gear into the trucks, Ethan clapped my shoulder. Alex, you are a tough guy. Remind me not to get on your bad side. I laughed and the sound was genuine and free. Just don't sleep with my wife and we'll be okay. We shared a grin. The dark humor, a reflection of how far I'd come. As I climbed into my truck, I took one final look at the lake. The sight of so many memories, both good and bad. See you next weekend, Ethan called out. I nodded. Start the engine. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As I drove home, I felt a sense of completion. The chapter of my life that included Laura was finally and truly over, but I wasn't sorry. It was over. Instead, I was looking forward to what the next chapter would bring. One thing was certain, I was finished being anyone's fool. From now on, I was in control of my own story, and anyone who tried to cross me would find out the hard way that Alex Thompson was not to be trifled with. The road ahead was open and I was eager to see where it would lead. Here is the next story. A Dyson fan accidentally exposed my wife's affair. I exacted my revenge in the funniest way possible. I discovered my wife's cheating thanks to a fan. Yes, you read it correctly. Never imagined I'd be writing this. But here we are. You know how it goes. You meet someone, fall in love and believe you have found the one. That was me. 7 years ago, I was employed as an specialist in this mid-sized company. Nothing particularly fancy. Just a typical cubicle job. I liked it because it was low-key and allowed me to zone out with podcasts all day. However, the company eventually hired a new project manager, and that's when things changed. Her name was Kelly. She was a vibrant, energetic woman who could brighten a room simply by walking into it. I noticed her the moment she walked into our office with confidence and charisma, as if she owned the place. She spoke in such a way that you felt like you were the only person she cared about. And for a while it seemed like I was that person. We began chatting during lunch breaks. Initially, it was just casual stuff. Where are you from? What do you do for fun? That type of thing. However, it quickly escalated into deeper discussions about our dreams, fears and everything in between. Before long, I looked forward to those conversations more than anything else in my day. It felt like we clicked in a way I hadn't felt before. One thing led to another, and before long we were dating. It wasn't long before we moved in together. Carly and I didn't hesitate to take big steps, even if we hadn't been together long, because we were the couple who did everything together. We prepared elaborate dinners, binge, watched Netflix shows and even attended cheesy couples yoga classes. I was all in. I was in love and thought this was it the relationship that could last forever. We eventually married in a small ceremony in front of only our closest friends and family. Nothing overly flashy, just the way we liked it. But you know how they say, the honeymoon period isn't forever. Yes, they're not kidding. After a few years, cracks began to appear. I've seen things go down even faster in other relationships. At least ours took a little longer. Initially it was minor incidents, Carly's unexpected interest in working late. She seemed to be more focused on her phone than on our conversations. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that every couple goes through difficult times. However, I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. The first major fight we had was over something stupid. I can't remember what it was, but it was intense and made me feel as if we were suddenly speaking different languages. That's when I realized how much we changed since our early days. The things that used to unite us now appear to divide us. I wanted to talk about it, to sort out whatever was going on between us. But whenever I tried, Carly would shut down. She would either become defensive or accuse me of overthinking everything. It wasn't just the fights. However, there were other indications that things were going south. Carly began making plans without me, going out with her friends more frequently and spending weekends away on work trips. The worst part was that I could feel myself growing increasingly distant. To avoid the tension, I began making excuses to leave the house, devoting myself to work, spending time with my own friends. We were like two strangers living under the same roof, pretending everything was fine, when it was obviously not. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling wondering what had gone wrong. I was still in love with her, at least I thought I was, but it was as if I didn't know how to contact her anymore. Every time I tried, she moved further away. I began questioning everything. Was it me? Was this her? Have we simply outgrown each other? I didn't want to believe it was possible, but the evidence was compelling. We tried couples therapy, but it felt more like a chore than something that would help. Carly would arrive late, clearly disinterested, and I'd end up doing the majority of the talking while she sat with her arms crossed, barely listening. After a few sessions, we both agreed it wasn't working, and that was it. The idea of breaking up began to creep into my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to say it aloud. It felt like admitting defeat, and I was not prepared for that. I began to feel like the woman in our relationship, because it is usually them who try their hardest to repair a completely broken relationship, while wondering if the problem is actually within them. I didn't enjoy being too emotionally involved. I had feelings for Carly. I'd never loved anyone else before. I was willing to fight for us. However, it felt terrible to be the only one willing to, so I did what any respectable adult would do. I in the problem, hoping it would resolve itself. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Instead, things became even worse. Carly became more secretive, and I noticed subtle but significant changes. She'd get nervous when I walked into the room, close her laptop quickly, and always have an excuse ready whenever I inquired about her day. It was as if we were living into different worlds, and I was the only one who hadn't received the script. I'd like to say I confronted her like a responsible adult, but that's not what happened. Instead, I buried my head in the sand, hoping that everything was just a dream of mine. It wasn't until we bought that damn Dyson fan that I realized what I hadn't known. But before I get into that, you should understand how bad things had gotten between us. At that point, I was more concerned with surviving each day without another argument than with repairing what was obviously broken. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, not knowing what would set her off or when the next fight would occur. The tension was suffocating. I could feel myself becoming increasingly resentful with each passing day. I was not pleased, not by a long shot, but I couldn't get myself to leave either. There was a part of me that still held on to the idea of us, the life we'd created together. But looking back, I believe I was simply scared. I'm scared of having to start over, of admitting that I had failed at the one thing I thought I had done correctly. So I stayed, even though I knew the relationship was on life support. And that's when fate, or rather a Dyson fan, intervened and gave me the wake-up call I'd been avoiding. I was stuck in a rapidly unraveling marriage, too stubborn or scared to take action. To be honest, I had no idea that a household appliance would be the catalyst for everything going wrong. It all began when Carly decided that our bedroom required a makeover. She had been complaining about the heat, claiming that our old fan was no longer effective. I assumed it was another of those passing complaints, but she went all out to find the best cooling systems, as if it were a life-or-death situation. A few days later she arrived with a brand new Dyson fan, one of those sleek bladeless models that look like they belong in a science fiction film. She was ecstatic, as if she had found the holy grail of air circulation. We even considered installing air conditioning, but our city isn't hot enough to warrant such an expense. The Dyson fan seemed like a good choice. I didn't have an opinion on it, but she seemed pleased with her new toy. I didn't think much about it at first, I mean, it was only a fan, right? We set it up in the corner of the room, and I must admit it was pretty impressive. It was quiet, powerful, and appeared cool, both literally and metaphorically. But it didn't take long before I noticed something strange. Every time I entered the room, the fan pointed in a different direction. Now, I'm not usually paranoid, but this was strange. I'd leave it facing the bed, and when I returned it pointed to the window, door, or closet. At first I assumed it was just Carly adjusting it. Perhaps she preferred the way the air circulated, but it continued even when she was not present. One night, after a particularly tense dinner during which we barely spoke, I decided to put a theory to the test. I positioned the fan to face the bed, made a mental note of where it was pointing, and then went downstairs to get some beer. When I got back up, the fan had shifted just slightly, making me think I was losing my mind. Then I remembered something. These fancy fans featured motion sensors that detected movement and adjusted airflow accordingly. That's when it struck me. What if it wasn't only detecting us? What if it picked up on something else? It sounds crazy, I know, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I did what any sane person would do in this situation. I turned to Google. After some research, I discovered that the Dyson fan's motion sensor was fairly sensitive. It could detect even the most minor changes in the room, such as a door opening or someone walking by. That's when the paranoia kicked in. What if the fan detected movement when I wasn't present? What if Carly wasn't really alone in the house, as she claimed? During the day, I started paying more attention to the small details. Carly would spend time at home alone, the strange shifts in fan erection, as well as the timing of her texts and phone calls. It was like trying to put together a puzzle with half of the pieces missing. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that there was something going on. I knew I needed to know for sure, but I didn't want to confront it without proof. I wasn't about to accuse my wife of cheating based on fan's unusual behavior, so I devised a trap. I installed a small hidden camera in our bedroom aimed directly at the fan. If anything or anyone caused it to move, I would record it for the next few days. I paid close attention to that footage. At first, there was nothing but the usual comings and goings, Carly moving around the room and the fan occasionally adjusting its direction. But then one afternoon I noticed it. Carly was in the room, talking on the phone and pacing back and forth, as she always did when she was engaged in conversation. However, this time she was not alone. A few minutes into the call, the door opened and a man entered. I couldn't see his face and I didn't need to the way. He approached her and hugged her, provided all the confirmation I needed. My heart sank there. It was as clear as day. My worst fears were realized when I learned Carly was having an affair, and she wasn't even trying hard to conceal it. The fan had been tracking their movements and reacting to their presence whenever they were in the same room. I felt like an idiot for not noticing it sooner, for allowing things to get so bad without doing anything about it. However, the initial shock wore off. Something inside of me snapped. I wasn't only hurt, I was angry, more than I had ever been in my life. I was not going to sit there and let her get away with it. If she wanted to play games, that's fine. I would play, but only on my terms. That's when the idea struck me. It began as a small, insignificant thought, but the more I considered it, the more perfect it appeared. I wasn't going to confront her directly. No, I was going to make her life as uncomfortable as possible with that damn Dyson fan. I knew she had a big presentation at work coming up, which she had been stressing about for weeks. She had been rehearsing in our bedroom, using the fan to keep the air cool as she practiced her speech in front of the mirror. I waited until the night before the presentation, when she was asleep, to execute my plan. First, I reprogrammed the fan. I figured out how to access the settings and increase the motion detection sensitivity to the maximum. Even the slightest movement would send it haywire, swinging back and forth unpredictably. Then I programmed it to a low, barely audible hum whenever it detected motion loud enough to be annoying, but not so loud that she would suspect it was intentional. The next morning I tried to act normal, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek before heading to work. I knew she'd spend the morning rehearsing one last time before going to work. Sure enough, around midday I received a frantic text from her. She wrote the fan's broken or something. It won't stop moving and makes this strange noise. I texted back playing dumb. That is weird. Maybe it is just the heat. And I could imagine her in the bedroom trying to remain calm as the fan went crazy. Every few seconds she gets thrown off her game. The thought of it made me smile like an idiot. It was only a minor victory, but it felt good to have the upper hand for once. Of course, that was only the beginning. The fan was only a warm-up, a trial run for the real vengeance that was to come. It was only the start, a way to play with Kelly's mind and see how far I could push her before she snapped. I was dissatisfied with a few glitches and distractions. I wanted her to feel the humiliation and confusion I had been experiencing for months. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't just some clueless, bumbling husband who could be kept in the dark while she had fun on the side. So after the fan stunt, I upped my game. I started making small, subtle changes that were just irritating enough to get under her skin. I'd switch her contact lenses to older, slightly weaker prescriptions, causing her to squint at her computer screen all day. I'd rearrange the files on her laptop, just enough to throw off her well-organized system. Nothing too drastic, just enough to keep her on edge. She began to unravel. I could tell she was constantly on her phone trying to figure out what was wrong. Her texts grew frantic. Her emails were brief and snappy. She was losing control, and it was only a matter of time until she snapped. Then, one evening after another of her late-night work meetings, I decided it was time to push her to the brink. I waited until she was in the shower before sneaking into the bedroom and opening her laptop. I found her presentation file and added a few interesting slides. It wasn't too outrageous. Only a few subtle digs. Things that only make sense if you understand what's going on. A slide titled Infidelity and Professionalism, a Case Study, for example, was followed by a series of graphs that made no sense. I left the rest of the presentation intact, knowing she wouldn't have time to go over everything before her big meeting the next day. The next morning, I made sure to stay home sick so I could witness the chaos. Around noon, my phone started filling up with messages from her. "What the hell were you doing?" she screamed into the phone. When I finally answered, I couldn't stop laughing as she complained about how I sabotaged her career, ruined her life, and was a vindictive, petty little man. "Are you really accusing me of interfering with your presentation?" I replied, pretending innocence. "Maybe if you weren't constantly distracted, you'd have noticed before you got to the office." That was the spark that ignited the fuse. She stormed home that evening, practically kicking the door open, her face flushed with rage. I'd never seen her so furious. She was practically vibrating with rage. "Do you think this is funny?" she screamed and threw her bag to the floor. "You've been messing with me for weeks. I know it was you with the fan files. And now this. What the hell is wrong with you?" I stood there, arms crossed, not even attempting to conceal my smirk. "What is wrong with me, you mean? Aside from the fact that my wife has been cheating on me with some random guy while I'm busting my ass to keep this marriage together." She froze, her eyes widening with shock. For a brief moment, the anger faded away, leaving only pure panic. "So what are you talking about?" "I am not. Don't even try to lie to me, Kelly," I said, my voice cold and firm. "I know everything. The late nights, the secret phone calls, and the guy you've been sneaking into our home when you think I'm not looking. I have it all on tape, thanks to your favorite fan." She opened her mouth in protest, but I wasn't finished. "I gave you every chance to come clean and tell me the truth, but you didn't. So I'm done playing nice." Her face turned pale and I thought she might faint. But then the anger surged back, stronger than before. "You set me up. You're the one who has been sabotaging me and making me look foolish at work. And now you want to blame me for your insecurities." I laughed. The sound was harsh and bitter. "Is that what you call it? When your wife secretly cheats on you? That to me is betrayal. But you know what, you're correct. I set you up. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the humiliation and confusion I'd been experiencing since finding out, and guess what, it worked. She lunged at me and swung her fist, but I easily sidestepped her. She stumbled, almost tripping over her own feet, and for a moment I thought she would fall. But she caught herself whirling around to face me, her eyes filled with rage. "Do you think this is a game?" she spit. "You think you can humiliate me like this and then walk away? I will ruin you. Ruin me." I interrupted again, my voice unsettling like calm. "Oh, Kelly, you have already done that. You've destroyed everything we owned. And for what a fling. With a few cheap thrills. You aren't ruining me. You are ruining yourself." She with her entire body trembling from rage. "I will take everything," she hissed, "the house, the car, and everything. You will be left with nothing." I shook my head, nearly pitying her. "Kelly, you can have it all. I don't care about that stuff. But you know what? You will lose your dignity. Everyone at work now knows about your little case study. They will recognize you as the fraud you are. I'll be there to watch your idyllic little life crumble around you." She stood there, breathing heavily, her face contorted in rage and desperation. I could see her realizing she had lost and there was no way out. And at that moment I felt an arc and vengeful shift within me. I was not just angry anymore. I was finished. "You should leave," I spoke quietly, turning away from her. "Pack your belongings and get out. We are done here." For a moment, she stood there as if she couldn't believe what was going on. But then, without saying anything, she grabbed her bag and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. As I heard the sound of her car engine fade into the distance, I experienced a strange mixture of emotions, including relief, sadness, and a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had won. The fight was over, but the real battle had just begun. Update: it has been a few weeks since our explosive fight. Carly left the house within a few hours. I didn't hear from her for a few days, giving me so much needed time to think. I was so focused on getting back at her that I hadn't fully considered what it would mean when she was no longer in my life, as angry as I was. A part of me remembered the woman I had fallen in love with, which made the silence in the house feel even more deafening. But I didn't have much time to think about it, because things escalated quickly after she left. The first sign of trouble occurred when I was served with divorce papers. There's no surprise there. Carly was not the type to drag things out, but her long list of demands surprised me. She wanted the house, the car, and a large sum of alimony. It was as if she thought she could simply walk out of our marriage and take everything with her, leaving me nothing. I must admit that when I saw that list, I had a moment of panic. It was one thing to have a fight and watch her walk out the door, but it was quite another to consider losing everything I'd worked so hard for. But just as quickly the panic was replaced with determination. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me, not after all she had done. My first move was to hire a lawyer, the good one. I wasn't going to roll over and play in nice just because things had turned ugly. My lawyer, Karen, listened to the entire story with a stony expression before nodding firmly. "We'll fight this," she said with confidence. "She's not going to get away with it." With Karen by my side, I felt slightly more at ease. However, it was more than just a legal battle. I wanted to ensure that the truth came out. Carly had always excelled at playing the victim and presenting herself as the ideal wife in front of others. But now I had the opportunity to show people who she truly was. I wasn't simply going to defend myself. I was going to expose her as a liar she was. I began reaching out to a few trusted friends to explain what was happening. I knew the rumor mill would start spinning as soon as word got out that we were divorcing, so I wanted to get ahead of it. I told them the truth about the affair, how I discovered it, and how I was not going to let her take me down without a fight. To my relief, the majority of them were supportive. A few people were shocked. Some people were disappointed, but overall they had my back. It felt good to have people on my side. Of course, Carly quickly began her own damage control. She wrote a lengthy, dramatic message on social media about how devastated she was by the end of our marriage, how she tried everything to make it work, but that I had grown distant and cruel. She even hinted that I had pushed her away. She had no choice but to leave. I couldn't believe she tried to spin the story as if she were the victim, but I maintained my cool and did not respond. Instead, I let Karen speak in court. The first hearing was brutal, but it was obvious that we had the upper hand. Karen had to respond to everything Carly's lawyer said. Our case was clearly successful. After that, Carly's demands seemed ridiculous, even to her. The lawyer attempted to negotiate a settlement that would allow her to save face while avoiding a public spectacle. But by then I had stopped caring about her reputation. I wanted justice and I was not going to accept anything less. The judge eventually ruled in my favor on nearly all counts. Carly received none of the alimony she demanded, and while she received some assets, they were a fraction of what she had hoped for. Most importantly, the truth about her affair was out in the open and she could not hide it. The divorce was completed faster than I anticipated. It was a relief, but also oddly anticlimactic. After all of the drama and build-up, it was concluded with a few signatures on a piece of paper. Carly left town shortly after that, probably hoping to start over somewhere where no one knew about her past. I didn't care. I was free, and that's all that matters. Now, a few months later, I am doing surprisingly well. I have kept the house, and while it is still strange to walk through it without thinking of her, it is becoming easier. I've begun dating again, nothing serious yet. Just checking to see what's out there. Car, on the other hand, is still looking for work. As far as I know, her reputation was shattered after everything that came out during the divorce. Finally, I got what I wanted. I reclaimed control of my life, and I refused to let her walk away without facing the consequences of her behavior. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I questioned whether I had gone too far. But looking back, I don't have any regrets. Sometimes you've got to fight fire with fire, and in this case I destroyed everything that was holding me back. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that you can't let people walk all over. You must stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult, even if it hurts, because in the end only you can fight for your own happiness. And this is exactly what I did. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.